Hey there, Krista. This is intended to give you some feedback on that job description. I'm sorry that it is really, really late at night on Wednesday night. Unfortunately, I've been taking these in alphabetical order, and you're the next to last one in the list. So you've had to wait a little bit longer, even though I know that you've been excited and anxious to get this information. Um, I wanted to get you to, before we get any farther, print out a couple of things, at least look at one of them and print the other. There's a doc file attached to this that has my updated version of your job description. You gave me version 1, I've given you back version 2, you're about to create version 3. I might create a version 4 with minimal changes, but let's make sure that we start from version 2 and not go back to version 1. I've done a little bit of aesthetic structural things, formatting things. I've added a few lines here and there, so make sure you've got the right version going forward. You're going to want to probably print the PDF file. Where I took your original file and I made scribble marks and made notes on there, if you've got this in front of you as I'm talking, it'll be a whole lot easier to make sense out of it. Now, assuming that you've looked at the doc file and you have printed this, and let me stress too, with the doc file, go find your original file and delete it off of your computer, and then save this one in its place. Now, with that said, you did a great job on this job description. There's a couple of little things I want to talk through it just again one more time to make sure that it makes sense, but give you some suggestions on perfecting the thing. The purpose of the job summary is in a paragraph, very short paragraph. The potential candidate can know what the nature of this job is. Cashier might mean different things to different people. So you want to be able to say, from the perspective of HR, what does a cashier do? And basically speaking, the cashier helps people who are in our store and who have selected merchandise exchange money for that and leave. So the basic job summary is that you're the final contact with them on our grounds. You're helping them to confirm their purchases, and you are getting their cash or their credit card information or so forth. So what you've got is in line with what we're looking for here. Where I might have some suggestions for you is in the context of processing the transactions. That almost sounds a little bit more like an accounting function or an accounts receivable function. What you're doing, I guess in a technical sense, is processing the transaction, but what you're doing is you're using the cash register or the POS point of sale system to make a notation in our databases that this inventory has left the building and we have entered this amount of either cash or credit into our bookkeeping system. So maybe reword that part of that, process the transaction using the company's transaction processing system. That's a little bit redundant anyway, process transactions and transaction processing. Make it sound more like use our technology in our cash registers to keep an accurate record of inventory that's coming and going, and create information that will allow our accounting people to do the proper transactions in our books. Other than that, you're pretty good here. I would eliminate the line that says reports directly to the operations supervisor, because we're going to talk about that later. I should be able to read this summary and say, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. I'm going to keep reading. Or I'm going to say, nah, that's not what I'm really looking for. I can stop here. The essential functions then take those basic ideas of the last point of contact, the keeping up with the inventory that's leaving the building, either now in their physical possession or on a schedule to be brought to them later. And beginning the transactions to our accounting system. What are the functions that you're going to do on a daily basis or a weekly basis to make sure that those things happen? So you're on the right track here. Receive the payments, issue the receipts, greet them, assist the customer complaints. By the time they're checking out, that should already have been done. You might consider eliminating that, because we're going to have customer service representatives that do that while they're wandering around the store. Again, by the time they get to the cashier, hopefully their complaints have been resolved, and you don't have to do that. Count the money. I've circled at the beginning of shifts. You probably do it at the end of shifts too. So sorry, this is my 13th video of the day, and I'm getting a little bit hoarse. You're going to probably update that to say at the beginning and the ending of shifts to make sure that the cash is balances. Answer their questions, whatever. Probably not pay company bills. We've got an accounts payable person who will do that. Compute, record, sort, count, monitor the stations, maybe monitor your station, but not other people's stations. And then other duties, I've expanded on that a little bit. You'll also notice that I put in a little disclaimer at the top saying that we're going to do what we can to accommodate you if you need that. You've done pretty good on the job summary and the essential functions. A couple of minor changes and then an encouragement to think not from the HR's perspective, but from the cashier candidate's perspective. Have I told you enough as a candidate to keep you reading? And do the essential functions give you a pretty clear idea of what you're going to do every day? Now, in real life, probably this is about where the job description ends, at least the version of it that they will see. Because all you're really interested in is telling them about the job. But I wanted you to do the job context so that you would think as an HR person about the environment that they're going to do these things in. And the purpose of the job context, the pieces that I've got here, A through H, provides them with short answers to some of the most common questions that they're going to have. Number one, the supervision received. It's not necessarily intuitive who the cashier reports to. You've told us that it is to the operations supervisor. From the perspective of the candidate, I can get your organizational chart and I can see where cashier is listed. There you go. You can see my fingers now. I can see where cashier is listed, and there is a box around the word cashier, and there's a line going up out of the top of it to another box. What title is in that other box? It is the operations supervisor. I'm encouraging everybody on this. There's very similar wording on everybody's because you will use the same template, and that template needs to be tweaked over time. What I've been seeing regularly in the best case situations, the best practices, is not just that the operations supervisor is on hand, but maybe directly under the operations supervisor who will be at the cash registers. Most of the day, right, in their office once in a while, but basically out wandering back and forth around the cash registers, right there to help you when you need it. Great in terms of training, questions, tasks, and if they're unavailable, operations manager will be able to assist, or you might say that this person will be available by email or by phone or something like that. And I'm going to have a lot of questions as a cashier. No matter how simple that job might be, how easy it is to learn, I'm still going to have questions. And if I've got 20 questions a day, I'm going to get frustrated having to go to my boss 20 times. My boss is going to get frustrated with me having to go 20 times. So the purpose of the available guidelines really is to tell you as the candidate what other resources you have besides that operations supervisor or operations manager. And there may not be a lot, although there may be some sort of a little reference manual that you keep under the counter where the cash register is. Certainly there will be some tools. Not everything we sell is going to have a barcode that you can scan. Some things you're going to have to look up in a book, but that's a reference. You're not going to have, the first time they come through with a particular piece of flooring, you're not going to have to call the manager and say, how do I ring this up? You're going to say, okay, there is a tag that says this is vinyl graphite number 3027, and you'll have a book that you can go to that has a scanner that you can code that you can scan. That's an available guideline. In other kinds of jobs, the cashier is a little bit different than most because there's not a cubicle, there's not an office with a door, there's not a shelf with books on it. But in most jobs, there are internet resources available. There's an intranet that the company has established. There's a web page. There's an employee handbook. There's a personnel manual. There are policies and procedures manuals. And for most jobs, there's a shelf with 4 or 5 3-ring binders. Those are the guidelines. What exists for the cashier that they can go to find answers without having to go to the supervisor? That's what you want under available guidelines. Accountability, consequence of error, the obvious things that are accountable for the cashier is keeping an accurate tray of cash and accurately recording all of the sales transactions, not giving discounts when they're not deserved, not letting people walk out because there are friends with a bottle of glue that they should have paid for. That's one of the biggest accountabilities. Friendliness is an accountability, those kinds of things. What are they, and what happens if you don't do them well? If you don't ring up purchases right, a $600 flooring tile goes out the door for $300, and we've lost $300 of profit. If we're not nice to people, they go out and they complain about us. They don't shop with us anymore. We've lost future business. They've told their friends we've lost their business. So there are consequences to things that we're going to hold you accountable for. Company consequences, financial, reputation, that sort of thing, but also personal consequences. If you can't do this job and do it well, we're going to move you to another job, or we're going to terminate your employment. So those are consequences as well. So think in terms of the cash flow, money that's coming into the register, leaving the register, accurate recording of credit card transactions, things like that, or payment plans, which might be part of the accounts receivable department, but you'd at least have the basic knowledge of how to set that up, or paperwork from our customer service representatives to guide you through the process. Let's see, I don't know what that other little note is out on the side. Collections, it looks like it says Cheryl. I may have written down something. I don't remember what that is, so let's just ignore that for now. Under personal contacts, who do you come in contact with on a regular basis? Certainly outside people, the customers will be coming in. There may be people come in from the outside that come past the receptionist. The receptionist says, oh, inside there. They get into the cashiers. They're not sure what they said, and so they ask you. There may be vendors. Certainly you will interact with other managers, with salespeople, with customer service people. All of those kinds of things needs to be here. Who do you interact with? How frequently do you interact with them? And what's the nature of those interactions? Some of that is in here. Operations supervisor to clock in and clock out. Sure, that's cool. Also to get information about what I need to be doing today. Is anything different? The cashier on a daily basis. B, you left out some words there. In contact with customers, exactly. You'll have to be in contact with the cashiers. You'll probably be in contact with our accounting people as you turn in your cash tills every day, count them up, whatever. You'll be in contact with managers in meetings, in things like that. Try to expand the list a little bit and get a little bit more comprehensive of other people you might come in contact with. Supervision exercised. Yeah, you're right. This will not generally have the opportunity to supervise anybody else, although we may call on you to help mentor new cashiers or things like that. So not formal supervision, but maybe informal leadership kinds of roles. Physical demands, you're going to be standing an awful lot. You might have phone conversations, but we've got customer service and call center people to do that. You're probably going to be focused on the customers who have things in their hands ready to pay and get out the door. Computer skills, yeah. Cash register skills for sure. Cash handling skills. Standing for 30 to 60 minutes at a time. Maybe standing for more than that. You might have to be standing there for 2 hours before you can take a break, or 4 hours before you can go to lunch. Walking short distances. 10 to 20 pounds. You might have to lift more than that if there's like a cabinet or something. But you're pretty good on physical demands. Work hazards, certainly OSHA. Everybody is subject to OSHA, so it's not necessarily something you have to put here or really focus on here. But you also want to talk about safe working conditions and caring for our employees. But what other kinds of hazards? I'm trying to brainstorm here as I do this video, keeping an eye on the time. There could be cleaning materials that create hazards. You could have a reaction to the stuff we use to clean the conveyor belts. There's probably stress in terms of handling money. You certainly are very well aware of putting $5 in there. If they hand you $5, giving back $1.12 if that's what comes back, and making sure this balances. There's a stress, and that can create a hazard of stress-related things. Ulcers, maybe, headaches, pressure, that kind of stuff. You might say that there are generally no major hazards, but there are some minor hazards, and kind of identify some of what those are. We don't certainly want to discourage people from applying, but we do want to be honest in terms of, this is not an ideal thing. It's not a utopia. There are some little problems with this, and we want to let you know what they are. Personal demands is from the perspective of, as you've started to address, what about this job could take me away from my personal relationships, overtime, holidays, weekends, busy periods versus slack periods. You've indicated it will require holidays, depending. Not required to work weekends or to travel on company time. I would eliminate the last little bit. We see competent, hardworking talent that we appreciate, whatever. That's not really related to, do I get to leave this job here when I go home? And have a distinction between my work life and my personal life. That's what the personal demands is really looking for. Under knowledge, skills, abilities, other characteristics, great job there. Go back and look at your essential functions and make sure that you've identified the knowledge that you have to do that well, the skills that you have to do that well, and the abilities that you have to do that well. Okay, so you might want to tweak that a little bit, but nothing significant. Minimum qualifications requires at least a GED certificate or high school diploma. That's cool. You probably for a cashier wouldn't say preferred that you have some college experience. It's probably irrelevant, and it would eliminate people that would be good candidates. Minimum of 2 years prior cash handling experience is required. Okay, if you're serious about that, I would expect that in a cashier type job that you wouldn't necessarily need to have 2 years of experience. Of course, I've got a PhD, and a lot of things come easy to me, but I would think that you could learn how to do that very, very quickly with no experience whatsoever. So rethink that. Make sure, especially in our context with business communication students who are sophomores in college, some of those folks may think this sounds like a great job, but they've never handled cash because they've never really had a job before. They can't apply if that is a requirement that you don't have. So maybe you'll say minimum of 2 years is preferred. I don't know. You decide on that. That's about all I can think of. We've gone through this. You've done a great job on this. A 93, a moderate A there. If you have questions that I haven't addressed, send me an email or give me a buzz or something like that. But start working on version 3 of this that you could email to me. Hopefully by late Thursday, at the very latest, early Friday, so that I can get our IT guy to load these things on Friday. You can start getting some responses from the communication students. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got coming up next, and to encourage you that you're doing a good job so far. Keep it up.